This daf is sponsored by David Grossman. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you would like to sponsor an Amar or a daf, see the description box below and see the description box below to see how you can support this channel. We continue now at the top of Daf Chav Daled Amud Aleph from Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 24a. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing the machlokas in the Mishnah between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim, if a litigant is able to disqualify the judges or if a litigant is able to disqualify the witnesses. And the Gemara now brings another approach to understanding the machlokas. When Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael, he said that Rabbi Yochanan said the following explanation: Be'edim psulin v'dayonin kesherin. In the first part of the Mishnah, we're talking about a situation where the witnesses are disqualified and the judges are kosher, and migo de pasli edim pasli nami dayone, since the litigant pasled successfully, he successfully disqualified the witnesses, therefore we also say he disqualifies the judges. And say for the end of the Mishnah, b'dayonin psulin ve'edim ksherin, we're talking about where the judges are disqualified and the witnesses were kosher, de migo de pasli dayonin pasli nami edim, since he was able to disqualify the judges, therefore also the witnesses are disqualified. And Rashi explains, be'edim psulim v'dayonin kesherin, baldin posel hadayonin v'ha'edim. The answer over here is that the baldin in both cases, in both the beginning of the Mishnah and in the second case of the Mishnah, we're talking about the litigant trying to disqualify both the judges and the witnesses. Now, v'nimtzu devor of emes al ha'edim. It turns out that what he said is corroborated when it comes to the witnesses. It turns out what he said is true. Umishum hachi, and because of that, mehemninan le afilu legabe dayonin. That's why Rabbi Meir says he's believed even with regards to the judges. And the Seifa is just the reverse. Seifa at the end of the Mishnah, Shenimtzu devar of emes al hadayonin. It turns out that what he said is true about the judges. Shepsul and Haim were able to verify they are indeed disqualified. And because of that, mehem ninon lehu ha'edim, so we believe him on the edim also. I'll leave it to Rabbi Meir, according to Rabbi Meir. V'rabbanan les lo migo. And the Rabbanan who argue on Rabbi Meir, they do not hold of this migo. And the Gemara continues, Maskif lo Rava. Rava asks the following question: Bishlama migo de pasli edim pasli nami dayone. I understand we would apply migo and say once the witnesses are disqualified, we'll disqualify the judges as well. Ika be dina achrina, because you can always go to another court. It's not a big deal to disqualify some judges. They can always take their case somewhere else. Elamigo de pasli dayone pasli nami edim. But if you're going to say that because the judges are disqualified, now we're going to disqualify the litigant's witnesses that he's bringing, va'edim suleka, but there are no other witnesses, so it really would not be fair to disqualify the only witnesses that this person has. And the Gemara answers to that, lo no tzrich, it's necessary, de'ika kasa acheres, there actually are another set of witnesses. And the Gemara continues, haleka kasa acheres mai, but what are you going to say? If there's no other set of witnesses, what are you going to say? Hachinami de lo matzi pasli, apparently then, we would say they're not disqualified through this migo, but hainu de Rav Dimi, but that's really then the same approach as Rav Dimi on the previous Amud. Rav Dimi explained that the Mishnah is talking with two sets of witnesses. And the Gemara answers to that, Ika beinayu, there's a difference between this approach and the approach of Rav Dimi, migo, whether or not we apply this rule of migo. Demar savar amrinan migo, one says we do say migo, umar savar lo amrinan migo, and the other one says we do not apply the rule of migo. And Rashi explains, Ika beidina achrina, again, you're able to go to another court, ve'eno nogea be'edus. Therefore, it's not a conflict of interest in terms of the testimony, because you can always take the case to another court. And Ravin savar amrinan migo, Ravin says we hold of migo. Again, the Gemara said the difference between Rav Dimi and Ravin is whether we say migo, meaning be'alma in general, do we say this principle of migo? Kedekai mahacha, like we say over here, ta'ima mishum migo, that the reason is because of migo. V'lav hachihu lo have a puzzle. And if not for migo, then we would say lo have a puzzle. Rabbi Meir wouldn't disqualify. Well, Rav Dimi lo amrin and migo be'alma. According to Rav Dimi, he doesn't hold of this concept of migo. Again, whether we say just because one thing is disqualified, like the witnesses, therefore we say the judges as well. That's the whole machlokas, whether we say that concept of migo. And the Gemara continues, Gufa, returning to what we said above, Amar Reish Lakish said, Pek Kadosh Yomar Davar Zeh, should such a holy mouth like Rabbi Meir, should he say such a thing? That was referring to Rabbi Meir in the Mishnah, that Rabbi Meir said a litigant is able to disqualify the other litigant's witnesses that he brings forth. How can that be? How can a litigant simply disqualify the witnesses that are brought against him? And so therefore he said, Tani Edo, therefore he said it shouldn't be witnesses in plural, it should be Edo, it should be singular witness. That's what we said on the previous daf. And the Gemara now says, Ini, is this really true? Meaning, would Reish Lakish speak with such reverence about Rabbi Meir, call him Pek Kadosh, V'ha'amar Ula, but didn't Ula say, Haroes Reish Lakish beveis HaMedrash, if somebody sees Reish Lakish in the Beis HaMedrash, Kilu Oker Harim V'tochnan Zeh Bazeh, it's like he's uprooting mountains and grinding them one against the other, so why would he speak about Rabbi Meir in that fashion? But the Gemara says, Amar Ravina says, what's the issue? V'halo kol haroa Rabbi Meir beveis HaMedrash, but anyone who saw Rabbi Meir as well in the Beis Medrash, Kilu Oker Hare Harim, it's like he uprooted the mountains upon the mountains, V'tochnan Zeh Bazeh, and ground them one with the other. So of course he could speak about Rabbi Meir with such reverence, because Rabbi Meir was even greater. But the Gemara then says, Hachi Kamar, no, this is what we meant to say. When we said Ini, we weren't asking a question, we were saying, Bo Re'eh, Kama Mechavin Zeh, come and see how much they were beloved to one another. We're just simply noting the fact that Reish Lakish would treat Rabbi Meir with reverence, and that was a great thing. Kihada Yosef Rebbe V'Kamar, it's similar to when Rebbe was sitting and saying, Asr Lahatmin Esatzonin, it's Asr to insulate cold food on Shabbos, maybe you'll come to insulate the hot food on Shabbos. Amar Lefan of Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi said in front of him, he said in front of Rebbe, Abba Hiter Lahatmin Esatzonin, that father, meaning Rabbi Yishmael is talking about his father Rabbi Yossi, he permitted insulating cold food on Shabbos. So Amar Le, so Rebbe said back, Kvar Horezakin, so the elder already ruled that way, that's what we should follow. And Amar Rav Papa, and Rav Papa said, Bo Rei Kama Mechavin Zeh, come and see how beloved they are to one another. Ilu Rabbi Yossi Kayim, because had Rabbi Yossi, again the father of Rabbi Yishmael, had he been alive, Hayakafuf v'Yoshev lifnei Rebbe, he would sit in humility before Rebbe. Dehar Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi memali makam avos of Havah, because Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi, he did fill the place of his father, he was considered as great. Hayakafuf v'Yoshev lifnei Rebbe, he was bent over and sat in front of Rebbe with humility, and nevertheless, even though they were humble before Rebbe, still the Ka'amar Kvar Horezak, and still Rebbe said, the elder already issued a ruling with respect to this issue. And Rashi explains, Bo Rei Kama, we are saying, look at how the Bnei Eretz Yisrael, as Rashi will say in a moment, how beloved they are to one another. Kilomar lo atzmui kamitami. It wasn't a question we're asking. Elahachi Kamar, what we were saying is as follows: Bo Rei Kama Bnei Eretz Yisrael mechabivin zeh. Come and see how the Bnei Eretz Yisrael, they honor, they respect one another, they're beloved to one another. The Reish Lakish charif v'chachem tuva, because Reish Lakish was sharp, he was very wise. Have it. V'kari leila Rabbi Meir pek kadosh, and he called Rabbi Meir the holy mouth. To come mechavivle, he was beloved to him. Umiyashiv tzadavar lehiskayim, and therefore he tried to say that what Rabbi Meir said, he tried to say an answer for it, a resolution, in order that it should be accepted. And the Gemara continues, Amar Raboshia says, Ma'ay dichsiv, what does it mean when it's written in the Pasuk? This is a Pasuk in Sefer Zechariah. V'ekach li shnei maklos, I took two staves, le'echad karasi noam, one I called pleasant, u'le'echad karasi chovlim, and one I called chovlim, which literally means to bind together, to unite. And the Gemara darshans the Pasuk noam when it says pleasant, elu talmidei chacham sheberetz Yisrael. This refers to the talmidei chacham in Eretz Yisrael, shemanimin zeh lezeh b'halacha, they are pleasant to one another when it comes to discussing halacha. And chovlim, when it says chovlim in the pasuk, elu talmidei chachamim shebebavel, this refers to the talmidei chacham in Bavel, shemechablim zeh lezeh b'halacha, it's like they destroy one another in discussions of halacha. And the Gemara continues, Vayomer elu shnei bnei hayitzar ha'omdim, this is also a pasuk in Zechariah, it says these are the two bnei hayitzar, referring to the anointed, ushnayim zeisim ola yitzar, and then it talks about the two olives, and the Gemara darshans these psukim. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak says, elu talmidei chachamim sheberetz Yisrael, shenochen zeh lezeh b'halacha keshem and zayis. The first pasuk, the one referring to the anointed, that refers to the talmidei chacham in Eretz Yisrael. They're pleasant with one another in halacha, like shem and zayis, like olive oil, which is sweet. Ushnayim zeisim oleh, and when it says to the two olives, elu talmidei chacham shebebavel, that's a reference to the talmidei chacham in Bavel. Shemerurin zeh lezeh b'halacha, they are bitter with one another in halacha, kezayis, like an olive. And the Gemara continues, quoting another pasuk in Sefer Zechariah, I lifted my eyes, I saw two women, and there was wind by their wings, like the wings of a stork. The ephah, the measure, was lifted between Shamayim and Oretz, between the heavens and the earth. I said, where are they taking the ephah? And he said said to me, it's to build a house in Eretz Shinar, which is a reference to Bavel. And the Gemara darshans the pasuk, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, Zu Chanufa vegasus haruach. This pasuk is referring to Chanufa, which is flattery, and gasus haruach, which is arrogance. Sheyardu leBavel, that they descended to Bavel. But the Gemara asks on this, is that really true? Vegasus haruach leBavel nachis. Did arrogance really descend to Bavel? Ve'amar mar, but the master said, Asara kaven gasos. There were 10 kav of arrogance, yardu la'olam, that came down to the world. Tisha not la'elam, 9 were taken by Elam. V'achas kol olam kulo, and the rest was through the entire world. And so Elam is not Bavel. And the Gemara answers in yes, leBavel nachas. Originally they descended to Bavel. V'shtarvuve deshtarviv la'elam, but then they made their way to Elam. And the Gemara says, Dekonami, we can infer this from the language of the pasuk as well. Dichsiv, because it's written in the pasuk, Livnos la bayis be'eretz Shinar, in order to build a house in Eretz Shinar. And Rashi says, Livnos la bayis velochsiv lohem alma ha'achas levada nisyash vasham. The way Rashi understands, it's written in singular, and therefore you see only the one of them stayed over there. The others went on to Elam. That's what is indicated in the pasuk by saying Livnos la bayis be'eretz Shinar. And the Gemara says, Shema mino, indeed you see that from the language of the pasuk. And the Gemara continues, Vamar mar, but didn't the master say, Simin legasas haruach anius, that a sign of gasas haruach, of arrogance, is poverty, v'anius leBavel nachas, and indeed there is poverty in Bavel. And the Gemara says to that, no, maya anius, what does it mean when we say that a siman of gasas haruach is anius, is poverty? It doesn't mean regular poverty. What it really means is anius Torah. It really means a poverty in terms of learning and teaching Torah. Dechsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, achos lanu, we have a sister, achos lanu ketana, v'shadayim ein la, we have a young sister, and she doesn't have breasts. And what's that referring to? Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Zu Elam, that refers to the area of Elam, shezachsa lilmod, that in Elam they were able to learn Torah, v'lo zachsa lalamid, but they were not able to teach Torah, and so that is the poverty of Elam. And the Gemara continues, my Bavel, what is Bavel? What does the word Bavel indicate? Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Belula b'mikra, Belula b'mishnah, Belula b'talmud. What it means is that it's mixed with psukim and mishnayos and Talmud with Gemara, meaning to say there's a lot of learning in Bavel. And the Gemara continues, the pasuk says, in Eicha b'machashakim hoshiveni, he has made me sit in the dark places, k'meisei olam, like the dead. What does that refer to? Amar Rav Yirmiyah says, is that Talmuda shel Bavel? This refers to the learning in Bavel, which is dark. It's unclear compared to the learning in Eretz Yisrael. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Amar lo, if he says to him, Nemon alai abba, Nemon alai avicha, my father or your father is trusted upon me to be a judge, I trust them to be a judge in this case, or Nemonim alai shlosha roe bakar, or I trust these 3 cattle herders to be judges. So can he retract that? Can the litigant say, I no longer trust them? Rabbi Meir Omer yachol lachzor bo, Rabbi Meir says he's able to retract. The Chachamim Omrim eino yachol lachzor bo, but the Chachamim say he can't retract. Once he accepted them as judges, they are judges for the case. And the Mishnah continues, let's say a person is obligated to take an oath to his friend, and the friend says back to him, Dorli b'chai roshchi, you don't need to take a real oath, just vow to me by the life of your head. That's not an actual oath, that's less than an oath. So again, can he retract? Can he say, no, I demand a regular shvua? Rabbi Meir Omer yachol lachzor bo, Rabbi Meir says he is able to retract. The Chachamim Omer, and the Chachamim say, ein yachol lachzor bo, he is not able to retract. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Dimi Bereder Rav Nachman Bereder Rav Yosef. Rav Dimi, the son of Rav Nachman, the son of Rav Yosef, said, Kegon de kible aleh bechad. When the Mishnah says that he's accepting his father, or the other person's father, as a judge, we're just talking about accepting him as one of the judges. Rashi explains, de kible aleh bechad dayan, one of the judges will be my father or your father. Ve'afagav dika trei achrini b'hadei, even though there are 2 other judges, Amar Rabbi Meir yachol lachzor bo, still Rabbi Meir says he is able to retract. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel, Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says, Machlokes b'macholach, the Machlokes in the Mishnah, in terms of whether he's able to retract or not when he accepts the person's father, let's say, as a judge, is talking about a situation of macholach. Macholach means that the toveya, the person claiming money, he's the one that initially says, I trust your father to be a judge, and therefore if your father should rule against me, macholach, I'll forgive it, I'm not going to make a claim against you. Avol be'etin lach, but let's say it would be the nitva, let's say it's the person who the money is being taken from, he's the one that accepts this person as a judge, divrei hakol yachol lachzor bo, then everybody agrees he is able to retract. And Rashi explains, b'macholach, in a case where he's forgiving, meaning, itoveya amar lenitva, if it's the toveya that says to the nitva, nemon olai abba o avicha, my father or your father is trusted in Yizkoch, if you win the case, Yehei Mochalach, then I'll be Mochel, I won't claim from you. So Hasam Ka'amri Rabbanan Eino Yochel Achzer Bo. There already, the Rabbanan say you can't retract. The Hazacha Zeb Emesha B'Yadam, we came in Shiyatza Zakah, because he's already forgiven it, and that's the end of the case. Aval Be'etin Lach, but in the opposite case, if he says, I will give to you, meaning it's the Nitva Amar LaToveya, the Nitva is saying to the Toveya, Im Yechayvuni Abba Avicha Etin Lach. If my father, your father says I'm chayiv, then I'm going to give it to you, I'll pay you. Divrei Hakol Yachol Lachzer. Then everybody agrees he's able to retract. The Hoel v'Hamaman Biyadu, because he has possession of the money right now. Ein bo koach l'Toveya lahotzi ela b'dayan and kasherin. The Toveya cannot take that money away unless there are kosher judges. That's why he's able to retract in a situation of etin lach again. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says that Shmuel says. And the Gemara continues for Rabbi Yochanan Amar, but Rabbi Yochanan says be'etin lach machlokas. It's not true. The machlokas in the Mishnah is in a case of etin lach, meaning it's in a case where we're talking about the nitva, whether he can retract or not. And the Gemara continues, they have the following question within Rabbi Yochanan. What does Rabbi Yochanan mean? By etein lach machlokas, does he mean to say that by etein lach there's a machlokas in the Mishnah? Aval b'mochalach, but in a situation of machalach by the toveya, divrei hakolein yachol achzer bo. There maybe everybody agrees that you're not able to retract because you're just being mochel. Oh, Dilmor, maybe Rabbi Yochanan means bein bazu machlokas, that the machlokas is in both cases. That's a question specifically within Rabbi Yochanan. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here the following proof. The Yamar Rava, because Rava says, Machlokis be'etein lach, that the Machlokis is by the case of etein lach, that's like Rabbi Yochanan. Aval b'mochalach, devrei hakol and yachol achzer, but by mochalach, meaning to say, when we're talking about the toveya, so then everybody agrees that he's not able to retract. And so the Gemara says, Yamar b'shlama be'etein lach machlokis. If you'll say correctly, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that he meant to say that the machlokis is only by etein lach. Aval b'mochalach, devrei hakol ein yachol achzer bo, but by the case of machalach, everybody agrees he can't retract. So then Rava Damar Rabbi Yochanan, then Rava is saying the same thing as Rabbi Yochanan. In other words, we're trying to bring a proof from Rava that Rabbi Yochanan and Rava essentially saying the same thing. Elo yamrid bein bazu vein bazu machlokas. But if you're going to say according to Rabbi Yochanan that the machlokas is by both the case of etein lach and machalach, so then Rava Damar Kaman, then Rava who's Rava following? And the Gemara says that's not such a strong question. Rava Taima, the Nafshei Kama, Rava is able to say his own opinion. Maybe he's arguing on both. He's arguing on Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, and he's arguing as well against Rabbi Yochanan. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei Rav Acha bar Tachlifa, l'Rava Rav Acha bar Tachlifa, he asked Rava the following question, Hayachayev l'chaveiro shvua, if a person is chayev to his friend to take an oath, v'yamar lo, and he says to him, Dorli b'chay roshcha, he says, you don't need to take a real shvua, again, just vow to me, b'chay roshcha, by the life of your head. So then we have a machlokas tanaim, Rabbi Meir Omer yachol achzer bo, Rabbi Meir says he's able to retract, v'chachamim omrim, ein yachol achzer bo, and the chachamim say he's not able to retract, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chav Dalid Amud Beis.